You're listening to the Synergy Leadership Podcast, a discussion with engaging, empowering, and enlightening leaders about the greatest competitive advantage in business and entrepreneurship that often goes unrecognized: a team's energy. Here's your host, the woman who puts the energy in synergy, Karen R. Jenkins.
Hello, and welcome back to another powerful episode of the Synergy Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Karen R. Jenkins, and today's conversation is one you don't want to miss. We're joined by a dynamic leader whose career has been dedicated to building bridges between business and community, access and equity, leadership, and impact. She has championed small businesses, shaped national transportation policy, and continues to break down barriers for entrepreneurs and underserved communities alike. In alignment with our Crisis to Confidence journey, this episode is all about what it means to lead with intention, influence real change, and make your business a vehicle for impact. So get ready to be inspired, challenged, and empowered. Grab your notebook because these gems are coming. And let's dive into this bold conversation on purpose-driven leadership and growth. I welcome to the podcast Shelby Scales. And Shelby, for those who may not know you yet, tell us a little bit about your journey and who you are.
Hi, Karen. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to be on the podcast and to share a few nuggets and thoughts I have. A little bit about me: have been journeying through the transportation world for quite some time now. Didn't start there, but started actually in parks and recreation and leadership there, and kind of fell into transportation early on in my career, and have just fell in love with moving people and providing transportation and mobility for people, but also opportunities through contracts and procurement. And so really my start was as a consultant with NCDOT, working with some of our minority and women-owned contractors, helping them to move from being a certified firm to a contractor, general contractors level, doing that work until I got called for RDU's major project at the time, Terminal 2. So went there and was the small business program officer for about 8 years, and really cut my teeth, so to speak, on all things entrepreneurship meets transportation. So we covered everything from construction, design, procurement to concessions, and concessions would be restaurants, retail, professional service providers, as well as rental cars and taxi services. So that was a lot of fun. Got to see a lot of dynamic small businesses be included in the economic engine of an airport. From there, was hired to be the president and CEO of the Airport Minority Advisory Council, a national organization there specifically for the purpose of encouraging and educating and promoting minorities and women in aviation. And so really got a chance to see on a national level policies, as well as how the federal dollars flow from FAA, USDOT down to our airports and subrecipients. And so that was very dynamic as well. And then from AMAC, came back to North Carolina and got tapped by our then governor, Roy Cooper, who hired me to be the Office of Civil Rights Director, and really had a totally different experience working with that governmental organization. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that was everything from policy to civil rights within the organization itself to the DBE and ACDB program. So a lot of different moving parts are part of your Offices of Civil Rights at the state level. So really enjoyed and learned a lot with NCDOT. From there, got called up to USDOT. And that was probably one of the most inspiring opportunities I've had in my career, was working under the Secretary Pete Buttigieg and his team. And I would say for for me, it was the first time in my career where I felt like the senior leadership team that I was a part of were all aligned synergetically with, if that's a word, with our goals and objectives. And that was to build wealth in underserved communities and with underserved and underrepresented communities as well. And so just seeing the dynamics of his leadership, leading a team of subject matter experts all aligned with the goals and objectives, was very inspiring to me and probably very pivoting to me. But then I also got enticed to come over on the corporate side of the world, which is with HMSHost, now Host by Volta. And I serve as the Vice President of Strategic Alliances. And again, we work with sourcing, promoting, advocating, providing technical assistance for minorities and women within our airport platform, particularly with our design and construction, our supply chain, as well as joint venture operators with our restaurants and our retail. And we're in over, I think now 80 plus airports in North America.
Wow.
And so my team does a lot of traveling and mining communities where we are competing for those opportunities, but we also want to make sure that we are inclusive of small minority women-owned businesses within those particular marketplaces that can bring products, services, concepts, brands to the airport and the traveling passenger. So again, just have had the grateful opportunity for many different touch points within transportation. My favorite would be aviation, of course, but I've just really enjoyed and learned so much about moving people and providing opportunities in communities through transportation.
So you have been blessed with a variety of roles and leadership roles. And I have to say that when I met you, it came across and it's been validated over and over again, your commitment to working with and uplifting the small business community, especially women and minority-owned small businesses. So you didn't just wake up one day and say that. You that's kind of who you are. You exude that. Almost every conversation you and I have had since then has had something to do with helping to uplift small businesses. So tell us what fuels your passion for leadership and impact in this particular area.
Well, I didn't realize it until later in life, but my father was an entrepreneur. He owned back then what was called the Mormon Transportation Services, a bus service in Martinsville, Virginia, small Southern Virginia rural town, the only bus company in town. And his focus was providing transportation for African Americans in rural counties surrounding the city and providing transportation for them to work. So you may have heard of companies like Bassett, Stanleytown, other furniture companies. Many of the underserved and underrepresented, particularly African Americans who worked in those factories, didn't have reliable transportation. And so he was that, for all intents and purposes, public transportation system to get people out of the rural areas into the city to have jobs. And he grew from there from 2 buses, which were, used, not brand new, on an 8th grade education, to upwards of 5 buses at one time. And he also was transportation for many of the local HBCUs in North Carolina, such as A&T and Winston-Salem State, when they did not have reliable transportation as well. So he did a lot to not only connect his entrepreneurship with the community, but he was bringing the community along so that they can, have an economic opportunity for their families. And so I didn't really understand all that until later. So I think it's really divine that I ended up in transportation. But one of the things that I learned as part of my story was my father had an 8th grade education. He had to depend upon Caucasian males to go get their CDL so that he could get affordable insurance, because the state of Virginia would not allow him to sit for his CDL and get that license, therefore be able to really grow in size and scale his company during that period. And so for me, the work that I do is always looking at wherever you come from, whatever your position and station in life is, you deserve an opportunity to participate in the economic engine of this country, specifically in transportation, because it can be very profitable as a wealth builder for your family and your community. And so I think about my father often, who's since gone on from us, but I think about the challenges he had, but he had the resilience, with that level of education to provide a need for the community, and specifically underserved and underrepresented community. And he was able to also provide wealth for his family. So I think it was ingrained in me without me necessarily knowing it or being taught that, but that's where I'm always in the fight. I'm in the fight for those entrepreneurs who are not only trying to better themselves, but also are bringing along their community.
That is phenomenal, and a generational wealth being created, passed on to different families, and we have not always had that opportunity. When you look back at your career, which is phenomenal, what was a pivotal moment or experience that, in your mind, most shaped who you are as a leader?
Wow, there's been several, but I would have to say a negative experience that I had. One of my particular early on positions, very young in my career, I was in charge of a lot of programs with a particular city. We won't get into that, but we had a drowning, and unfortunately, as the leader of that organization, that division, I was the scapegoat. And so being young as a professional, you don't really know what responsibilities you really have to manage the thing, right? And so just going through that, surviving that, and being able to pick up the pieces and learn from not only, having a job. Yes, you get paid for a job, but there is so much more to what we do that impact lives and communities. And can you manage the thing, right? Are you equipped? Do you have the resources and the infrastructure to manage that which you are responsible for? And clearly, I was not properly prepared or properly supported. And so I made up in my mind, once I kind of got on the other side of the situation, as a manager, leader of a major responsibility, so to speak, to never take on more than I can manage. And when I feel myself being ill-equipped or not supported in such a way that would be, a danger to other people and myself, to raise my hand and to really, get off the bus or get off the train, because you never want to be in a position where you're in so much chaos that it causes harm to someone. And that was really a pivotal point for me to go back and really say, hey, it's a great job. I was making, decent money, but was it worth it? Did I have the support? Was I properly equipped? Did I have my arms around, that which I was responsible for? And clearly it was no, 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 no. And so it taught me, you can't just take on a responsibility, take on a job when you're not equipped for it.
And it's okay to say I'm not okay.
Yeah,
a
it
lot
is.
of people think, oh, well, if I raise my hand and say I'm overwhelmed, that's failure. No, that's being a good person. That's being a good
Right.
manager. That's recognizing your limitations and saying, hey, we still have to accomplish the objectives and the goals, but we need to do it with more reinforcement. So kudos
Exactly.
to you for raising your hand and recognizing that, and then putting that to use. So when you look at all of the different hats that you won, from, transportation executive to small business advocate, how would you describe your leadership journey in one word, and why?
Mission.
Mission. Yes, for you, I will totally agree with that.
Oh,
Mission.
that word came so easy to me, but it really is. It's the core of who I am. I can't run from it. It's my lane. Many of my opportunities, I did not actually go to seek them out. They sought me out. And so for me, it was like a divine path, divine order, not like, but is a divine path for me. And I just have to, going back to the earlier question, prepare myself, right? Each step that I've taken has been more and more global. And so I've learned to manage at the level that I'm at because I know the next step is going to be bigger and more global, and you have to prepare yourself for that, right? And so it's bringing the skills and experience in the past, in your past experiences, but it's also learning all that you can and listening and surrounding yourself with others who are, have the same synergies or, synergies that you need to prepare you for that next step. But mission is definitely the journey that I'm on. And I get a fire in me often when I'm in a boardroom or in a policy situation where I'm the only one in that room that looks like me, speaking on behalf of underserved and underrepresented communities, right? I'm very passionate and very much an advocate for people to be able to have an opportunity, a real opportunity, not just a marketing scheme, but a real opportunity to participate in economic development.
Well, I can say I have watched it real time. You are definitely mission driven. And it's a beautiful thing to watch because I think if more people took on the mission driven perspective, we overall would be in a much different place. So kudos to you for displaying that and walking that walk and living that every day. So we've got the mission driven part of you. So share with the audience what guiding principles have helped you lead effectively across such diverse environments.
My grandma used to always say, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So listening, right? I always try to start with listening and really understanding the mission of that particular organization or position that I was placed in or is in. What are the core goals and objectives? Because you can't be all to everybody. You get spread so thin that you become lukewarm, right? So you really got to have some core goals and objectives and synergies around what you can provide and lead on, as well as leading up and leading down and leading laterally, right? So for me, it's that. And then I would say my third bullet would be to communicate your plan, execute your goals and objectives, and really then highlight what you've accomplished. Because people have very short memories.
Yes.
And oftentimes as leaders, we don't always want to talk about the things that we've, helped to facilitate, coordinate, and get done. But people need to know that about you so that they know what your story and your book of business looks like, right? So it's not top of mind all the time, but once you go into a situation and plan, and then execute, you really have got to start talking about that which you have accomplished so that people can understand what else can you do? What's the next step?
So what I love in this conversation is, of course, we're the Synergy Leadership Podcast, and you have referenced the word synergy multiple times. Our audience knows from being around us is, we believe in synergy leadership. And for me, synergy is the ability to leverage your energy and the energy of others to obtain, like-minded goals or obtain that objective or the goals or the mission or the things that you're setting out to do. We're all kind of rowing and going in the same direction. You mentioned the synergy that you felt that everybody was kind of in the same arena, working in the same direction when you were working for the U.S. Department of Transportation. That's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
But at the heart of leadership is influence.
Mhm.
And then when you look at that, and of course, influence will help you be able to leverage your energy and the energy of others. How do you stay grounded while also leading from the front?
Hmm. You know, I think as leaders that we sometimes put too much pressure on ourselves. We think we have to have all the answers. I stay
Mhm.
grounded by trying to see answers from as many different touch points in my sphere of influence as possible, right? So
Yeah.
whether it's the CEO or whether it's the admin or whether it is a vendor coming through the door that thinks they know about our company and can help us with something, you're always listening for how to make those dots connect, right? So I really try to, when I say listen, it's also seeing, not just what I think is the vision, but what other people can bring to the table and to the conversation. For me, being out front, you got to have some people behind you, beside you, around you to keep you grounded, keep you,
Mhm.
keep your arms lifted up when you're tired. So it's having a good core network of people around you that can also challenge your thinking, and not in a negative way, but just, to be able to bounce things off of, to say, hey, I'm thinking about, or I'm challenged with, or I don't have the resources. How should I approach this? So, having that support group, and that support group may not always be necessarily your champions. It could be someone that, that you got to go show me to, but you can learn something from them too. That's one of the things my husband always tell me. You can always learn something from everybody, everybody.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I think that's really what keeps me grounded and keeps me out of my head and just looking at what the universe is putting before me and trying to connect those dots and listening to my spirit to say, go left or go right. Yeah.
So switching gears just a little, you've been in these roles, you've been a champion, very mission driven. Over the years, you've mentored and empowered countless entrepreneurs in the roles that you've served. What advice do you give to those who feel stuck or invisible in rooms where decisions are made? And then what advice would you give them in general?
So, and I felt the same way because oftentimes in the roles I've had, I've often been the only female or one of three, and most likely the only minority female around the table. Um, I've been in situations where I was the only female and the only person of color around an industry CEO table, and that was very dynamic and interesting to say the least. But I would say for me, I've been most successful, and I was taught this. This was not something that I got at Carolina, but one of my mentors shared with me is you need to have an advocate internally and externally, right? So internally, you're going to have people that understand your vision, understand, what resources you need and can help you navigate where you may not be in this room or this scenario. They can tell you, hey, go talk to this person, go ask for this, ask this question, because you don't always know the landmines of an organization. So you need other advocates within the organization that you can, talk to and express what your vision, what your goals and objectives are, and they get it, right? Externally, you need the same type of champions because that tension between what the organization is trying to accomplish and how the end user is going to be impacted, you need those voices to help complement you as a leader, right? So I would say as an entrepreneur and as a leader, that's something that's really worked for me. Internal, external advocates that understand your vision and your goal and where you're trying to go. Again, listening, networking, having synergy. But I always tell my entrepreneurs when they approach organizations that I work for is do your homework so that when you pitch to us, you are part of the solution and not the challenge, right? Don't approach me as a certified whatever. approach me as an experienced entrepreneur who can help my organization solve a business problem. And I think that's really, really key to getting a more fruitful conversation. And then you got to deliver what you promise.
Definitely. So one of the things is and of course, you know, my background as well. I too am in rooms where I am the only. And that can be a double only female, only African American. And I think what we have to do as business owners, regardless of whether you are a woman business owner, a underserved market business owner, whoever you are, we have to get out of our comfort zones because to do business is green. And unless everybody that looks like you is your client, then you might need to go out to the world and be exposed to and have the world be exposed to you as far as what's, as you said, not the services I provide, but the problems that I solve so that people know that you are a resource. And, you know, what I share with our viewers all the time is that people do business with people they know, like, and trust. But if they don't know you, it's like you coming into the office saying, hey, give me a contract. It's like you saying, hey, come marry me. And I've never met you before. So we have to start building relationships long before we need them. One of the things that and you and I have had this conversation as well about some of the smaller businesses that don't get opportunities to go after some of the contracts because they'll see a contract, the RFP comes out and it's 5 things that they have to do. Well, they can do 3 of them. And they say, oh, well, no, I can't do it. Well, yes, you can. Team with someone that can add the other 2 scopes that you don't currently have, because to me, you know, 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing.
Absolutely.
So talk to us a little bit about what you've seen in that arena as far as how small businesses cut themselves short when they have opportunities to go after stuff that they didn't really think they could.
Yeah, I don't see so many people not going after opportunities. I see people going after opportunities that they're not yet qualified for, and they haven't put their teams together, right? And so I particularly with male entrepreneurs talking to a female, they don't always want to show you your weakness, but if you don't tell me where the gaps are, I can't really help you, right? I'm assuming that what you're telling me is holistic, when in actuality, you do have some gaps on 1 and 2, right? But if you tell me, hey, Ms. Scales, I can do these 3 things, but I really don't have the infrastructure to do, you know, 4 and 5, maybe I know somebody that can, you know, come alongside you and provide that. Maybe I can help facilitate that relationship. Maybe I can break the package down where you can do just the 3 things and we can give the opportunity to somebody else. But it's really being transparent and communicating such that, again, you're solving a problem for someone, but you're also being transparent enough to say that here's where I am in my business cycle. You know, I have a challenge in this area, not that something that you can't overcome, but please do tell me that if you have a gap, it's a gap, right? Because otherwise I'm going to assume that you can do 100%. So I see more of that than I do people not jumping in and taking advantage of it. But also, I would say those folks that may stumble a little bit, everybody does. Even the larger corporations have hiccups and challenges and systems and processes that, you know, they need to further develop. But when you are confronted with those things, again, don't run from it. Come to your client or to your customer and talk it through and work with them synergetically to, you know, to come up with a resolution. It may be, in a lot of cases with small businesses, and I've seen this on the construction side, cash flow issues, and they need to get paid more frequently, right? Say that up front. Say, I can't wait 90 days to be paid. I need to pay my vendors because I'm my finances established, things like that. So I would say, again, work with your client and your customer as closely as possible. And we all want to win, right? I mean, when you're on the team, we're the team. We want to get that goal and objective accomplished with as little challenges and hiccups as we can on both sides of the conversation. So don't run from challenges and hiccups, hit them head on and try to, be open enough to be transparent to work through whatever challenges you're having.
And on that note, for me, with our clients, and we don't have many of these because we're probably more proactive than reactive. We have this process in place that we're constantly in contact with our clients. We're asking them ahead of time, what's going on? How's it going? Does it even look like it's going to smell strange today? Because we want to be on the front side of that. So we probably over communicate. But for those businesses that, you're just going along and something happens, it's not necessarily what happens, is how you respond to it.
Yes.
So for a client, if there's a hiccup, because there's like, as you said, there's going to be hiccups. I don't care what size you are, but when you are Johnny on the spot to, either identify the problem, or when it's identified and you're Johnny on the spot and you're making sure it's resolved, and then you're fixing the issue, and then you're overly communicating of when it's going to be fixed, and then you come back and say it's done, that goes a long way for clients. That builds this sense of comfort and trust, because they know things are going to happen, but they also know that they have a trusted resource that, regardless of what's going on and what's happening, they will be there to fix it and fix it expeditiously. So that's some of the advice that we can give to not just small businesses, but business leaders in general. So, a couple more questions before we conclude, but now that we're on the small business conversation, what, in your years, if you looked at a variety of businesses, what would be some just basic advice that you would give to our small business community?
For me, is write the vision and make it plain. So as a leader, I had to learn that the hard way. So once I got past management and got up into the executive ranks, you really become a visionary, and you have to write it and articulate it and communicate it, over and over and over again, so that the broader team can understand where we are going, right? And there's a jump and a leap that people have to make between, that level of managing to being an executive, right? And sometimes people don't always get mentored in that space and in that gap. And this is even as an entrepreneur, right? So I can build a thing with my own hands, but when I start building my team, now I've got to incorporate training, quality control, infrastructure, processes, redundancies, right? And we just want to jump in and do it because that's what we're comfortable with, right? But as you grow size and scale, I would just really encourage people to, on an annual basis, do a self-assessment in their leadership, in their goals, in their vision, but also as their company, particularly small businesses, right? Are we in our lane? Can we grow? How do we build that growth? Do we have the infrastructure to bring on more people? Do we need to bring on more people, or do we need technology and equipment that can do things that an individual can do? And what's the impact of getting a person and a body versus the technology and equipment, right? But all of that takes putting that vision either on the board, mapping it out, assessing it with your team or with your board or with just advisors that are stakeholders and want to see you successful. But you have to go through that reflection point and that development point of yourself and of your organization on a regular cadence, right? Because technology is always changing. Expectations of the clients is always changing. People that come in and out of your organization have different personalities, different agendas. So you have to make sure that as a leader, as an entrepreneur, CEO, owner, operator, whatever you want to call yourself, that you're doing that self-reflection and corporate reflection on a cadence. You got to do that.
But very much so. We have an annual strategic planning session where we go in and we do all of that. It's not just about the plan, but you also have to look at the landscape. Like for now, what's happening this year is totally different than what we thought it was. So now we have to come back and even reset to say, okay, based on where we are today, what do we look like? And I love the fact that you talked about the vision, But then when you talk about the vision, when you're in that brain space and the leaders are in the room around that big table, we are saying, this is the vision. And even if we put in an email and send it to the staff, are they really receiving and understanding what that vision is? So sometimes we have to break that vision down and we have to articulate it in a way that from the entry-level staff person up to the highest echelons, everybody gets it, right? Because I'll use this as an example. We have core values on our team. Our core values are people first, always. Service, excellence, integrity, and synergy. Synergy is always our word. And then when we say, what does that mean? Because I could get 5 different definitions for each one of those words.
And you
We
will.
came up with what I call KRJC fundamentals, right? And these fundamentals it's a list of 20 things that helps our team understand what does it look like when you're living our core values out loud. Being responsible for the energy you bring into the room is probably one of the biggest ones when we talk about synergy. Taking care of each other and our customers, follow up on everything. So just a few examples of how we're showing them and telling them this is how it looks when we're actually living our core values out loud. And what I found with a lot of clients and businesses in general is that they can tell you what their core values are, but their staff can't.
Right.
Or they can tell you what the core values are, but it doesn't look like those are your core values because your staff isn't acting that way. And that's some of the stuff that we do in working with some of our clients, is helping them identify what their core values are, helping individuals identify what theirs are. Because here's the other thing. Core values for your team members don't need to be identical to yours. Just like my personal ones aren't identical to my business, but they align. Most of the teammates that come on our team, especially in our leadership team, I send them through a core value exercise. And they are now able to articulate, because normally if I ask you off the top of your head, you can talk around it, but you can't tell me what are the top 5. But once they give you the top 5, if it doesn't really align with your organization's top 5, that might be an indication that this might not be the right role for them. So the example that I use is somebody that one of their true core values is peace. Like that is very important to them. But that person doesn't really need to be working in customer service, right? But you see it all the time. And then you're trying to figure out, why is this person going to work miserable every day? Why are they coming home bummed out every day? It's because the function doesn't align with their core values and what's important to them. So they might need to go get another job, right? Or you'll sit in another seat. So as leaders, I think it's important for us, as we're setting the vision, as we're helping our employees understand what our core values are and what we're doing, that we also help them figure out what is your goal, aspirations, where do you want to be, and then help them get there. And that's some of the things that we do.
And Karen, I know you do this because I've worked with you, but it's also walking the walk, right? We can have all the great sayings, core values, posters, banners, you name it, pencils, it's plastered all over the place, so people can't miss it. But I find that if you are the model of your core goals and you are modeling that behavior, that's always a good thing, right?
Yes.
Again, you can't assume that people coming into your organization know what that looks like.
Right.
And I think, oftentimes people get disenchanted when leadership, really have a great marketing program, but they don't walk, right? They don't listen to all levels of the organization to really understand, what are the pain points of the organization, so that they can really model the core values. So I would just add that tidbit to it. It's modeling behavior is always good, whether it's, your personal leadership or, trying to get the core values of the corporation aligned. And I'll tell you, one of my most challenging opportunities, roles, was where that was lacking, right? So we had our senior leader who, really wanted to build this great and grand infrastructure. We had the resources to do that, but the organization had not dealt with the negative culture of the organization from a human perspective, right? A lot of turnover in the group, lack of skill set because the organization really were not hiring the subject matter expertise to do the work that was coming down the pipe for the KIPs, right? The KPIs. So walking into that situation, you know, I know exactly what my goals and objectives are. I know exactly what we want to accomplish. I know how to do it. And my team is looking at me like, are you serious? We don't work on those days.
Wow.
And are you
Okay.
serious? I've never had to project manage before. What is project management, right? I can actually make a decision, right? And I'm thinking, okay, you're a senior level manager. Yeah, you not only can you make that decision, but you should be coming to me with best practices as a subject matter expert to help us execute the vision, right?
Right.
And so that was probably one of the most challenging roles I've ever had because of those two things, because the culture of the organization was such that they had not aligned or even really thought about the core values of the organization versus the tasks at hand. And then they had not aligned the people skills with executing the goals and
The
objectives, right? And
problem.
that was very, very tough to
Yeah, and it would. And you know, for us, when we talk about what one of the solutions that KRJ Consulting solves for our clients is we help them identify or restate their
Mhm.
core values. We help them live those core values out loud from, as I said, entry level to the top. But I call that cultural integration.
Mhm.
Right? We've never really been a diversity, equity, inclusion company because for me, if you're a company and these are your core values, and if you are living those core values out loud, all of the things that are part of that diversity, equity, inclusion would be incorporated in that cultural integration. So it shouldn't even be an issue, right?
Right.
So if everything was level, certain things wouldn't be needed.
Mhm.
And now that they're saying they aren't needed, then let's go back to making them level. So that's
Right.
where we come in. We'll be happy to come in and work with organizations to help them live their core values out loud for every single employee that brings what I call the human capital to the table and making sure that we're leveraging those. I'm definitely going to bring you back because there's so much more that we can talk about if you'll come. So
Oh,
we're gonna
absolutely.
wrap this
Absolutely. You
up.
have my time. You have my time.
I know, and I love you for it. I love you for it. Um, so I'm gonna ask you, what do you want to do? You want to do rapid fire, or do you want me to ask you one closeout question?
We can do rapid fire, whatever, however
Okay,
you'd like to pick my
all right.
brain.
So rapid fire, rapid fire, rapid fire. Okay. A book that changed your leadership style.
The Bible.
Ooh, the Bible changed. Okay, so go deep. All right.
Yeah, I would say the Bible, gives us examples of leadership and obedience to the calling. And when we get in ourselves versus the mission, right? And we've seen plenty of characters
Yes.
who allow their ego or their personal weaknesses to get them off course. And so just, reading, some of the characters in the Bible and how they handled their personal challenges while in leadership, and then, the wisdom that they gave the reader. And
Right. That's powerful. Thank
yeah,
you for that.
it's been very helpful to me to look at some of those characters.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So a quote you live by.
To whom much is given, much is required. And I must say that I've
Yes.
been very blessed in various components of my life, but I've been very taxed as well. And so I remember that, I think sometimes people, particularly those who love me very dearly, often
Mm-hmm.
ask me to slow down or to
Mm-hmm.
take a breath or whatever. you know,
Yes.
but I know in my core fiber that I've been very blessed, and I know that time is of essence for all of us. You know, we don't know what our dash looks like. And I'm not trying to run up against a tree, but I also feel like I could sleep later. So I'm trying to balance that.
Yeah, I need you to do the balance thing. In our next episode that we come together on, we'll talk about that work-life balance thing.
But now you know.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing leaders need to unlearn.
That they don't have to have all the answers. You know, listen more than you talk. I know that people believe that, you know, if I'm the leader, whether you're a pastor, whether you're a coach, whether you are a CEO, you can learn something from anyone. And that little nugget that you might glean might be that missing chip to make your vision be executed well and efficiently, right? So I just try not to take myself too serious where I can't hear other people and I can't listen to their voice and what they have to add to whatever we're working on.
Well, Ms. Scales, you have been an outstanding guest. We so appreciate you sharing all that you have shared, and I know we'll bring you back to share some more. The vision being the vision. I know there's a lot more for you to do. I need you to slow down while you're doing it, but we look forward to your next chapter. So for those people who want to learn a little bit more about Shelby, would we direct them to your LinkedIn page? Where would we go?
Absolutely. Yeah, they can go to my LinkedIn page.
And that is?
Shelby Scales 1.
Okay, so go to LinkedIn at Shelby Scales 1 to learn more about this phenomenal leader who is so just authentic and self-sacrificing at times, to be out there and carry the torch for the small business community and for underserved markets. So again, Shelby, thank you for being here. To our audience, thank you for being here. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Synergy Leadership Podcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Synergy Leadership Podcast with Karen R. Jenkins. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe, rate, review, and share our show. See you next time.